pro-life push. Lawmakers are preparing legislation to coincide with next Friday's March for Life. We're on Capitol Hill. Texas Democrat Henry Cuellar met with President Trump. He gives us his take on whether a deal on Dreamers could happen. On the road again, Pope Francis sends a message ahead of his trip to Peru and Chile. When the saints go marching in, the Big Easy unveils a statue of a holy man who visited New Orleans 30 years ago. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, January 10th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. House Speaker Paul Ryan will address the 45th annual March for Life next week in Washington, D.C. Capitol Hill is abuzz as lawmakers work to pass pro-life legislation in time for the march. We go to our eyes and ears on the Capitol Hill. Jason Calvi. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The March for Life says it's honored Speaker Ryan will attend the rally. The group expects over 100,000 pro-lifers to descend on D.C. next Friday. Now, next week, pro-life lawmakers will have the chance to thank them and millions of other Americans with a life-affirming vote.
Next week, the U.S. House takes up the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Timed around the March for Life.
Life care, if you will, for these precious little babies.
I talk with the bill's lead sponsor, Representative Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee.
It is just so important that we continue to stand on the side of life, and we continue to find ways to make certain that these babies and mothers are protected and are going to receive the care that they need.
The bill requires a doctor to save the life of a baby that survives an abortion or face criminal charges. Another pro-life bill in the works is Representative Steve King's heartbeat bill. It would ban abortions after the doctor detects a heartbeat. A vote isn't likely, but King says time is of the essence.
So we've got to get ahead of this thing. If we lose a majority in the House or in the Senate, or for some reason the president has a change of heart, or in another circumstance, maybe lose in a future election, we've missed our opportunity. 60 million aborted babies in 45 years.
Representative King accuses National Right to Life and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy of blocking the heartbeat bill. National Right to Life tells me that's just unfair. They say they're focusing on other pro-life bills. Lauren?
Jason, what is the possibility that the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act will become law?
It will most likely pass the House next week, but its chances in the Senate are very slim. In 2015, the House passed it on a 248-177 vote, but the Senate, it never picked it up.
Correspondent Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. President Donald Trump welcomes the Prime Minister of Norway to the White House.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Solberg of Norway.
The president met with Solberg for meetings in the Oval Office. Solberg is the first foreign leader to visit President Trump this year. And President Trump lashes out after a federal court blocks his decision to end a program protecting young immigrants from deportation. It comes just a day after the president received good reviews for working with lawmakers on an immigration deal. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The temporary ruling says the president cannot end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program known as DACA while lawsuits play out in court. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders calls it outrageous, especially after yesterday's successful bipartisan meeting with members of Congress on the issue. President Trump is also firing back, tweeting, "It just shows everyone how broken and unfair our court system is when the opposing side in a case such as DACA always runs to the Ninth Circuit and almost always wins before being reversed by higher courts." Democrats say lives are at stake. 800,000 Dreamers grew up in this country after their parents brought them here illegally. Now the Dreamers fear they could face deportation.
We want to see something happen with DACA. It's been spoken of for years.
The president publicly hammered out the framework of a deal with lawmakers yesterday. promising long-term protection for dreamers in exchange for better border security, including his long-promised wall. If the bill makes it through Congress, the president promises to sign it.
We're also making America safe again. Yesterday, we had a bipartisan meeting with House members and senators on immigration reform, something they've been talking about for many, many years. But we brought them together in this room, and it was a tremendous meeting.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops tells me it pledges to work with Congress and the White House to help find a solution. They urge Congress to find a bipartisan solution that humanely addresses the status of dreamers. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Representative Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas with a history of bipartisanship on immigration, joins us now. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, and thank you so much.
Your district is on the border with Mexico, and you support helping dreamers. At the White House meeting yesterday, where you attended, when you walked out, did you think that a deal could be made on DACA?
You know, I think it's possible, and quite honest, it's going to be a very difficult issue because if you look at the history of immigration, legislation on immigration, it's always very emotional. But even though it's going to be difficult, I really think there's a possibility we can work something out.
All right, what kind of compromise, then, can you support?
Well, you know, first of all, we want to make sure we protect those 800,000 young folks that we call dreamers, number one. Number two, on border security, we want to see border security. Unfortunately, sometimes our Republican colleagues they equate the wall to border security. Even if you built the most beautiful wall, keep in mind that 40% of the people that we have here came in through a legal permit, visa, which means that even if you put a wall up, they're going to be able to go across a bridge, fly by plane, or go by ship. So we just got to be smart on how we secure the border. And then, of course, the other two things that we talked about is what do we do about chain migration? Do we just say the immediate family, or can they bring in other folks? And, of course, the diversity lottery visa is something that we need to talk about also. I think we can reach an agreement on those issues.
And would it be just a clean DACA bill that you're looking to pass, or would it be an overall comprehensive immigration bill? Do you split that in two? Where do you think you can get this bipartisan support?
We need to look at the narrow issue of dreamers, number one, DACA. But then at the same time, it just can't be clean, say, that's it, that's all we're going to do. We got to talk about border security and how we define border security. What does the wall mean? Those are the issues that we need to sit down and talk about, and I think we can reach an agreement.
President Trump called himself the law and order candidate when he was campaigning, and I read that you call yourself a law and order Democrat. Do you see similarities between yourself and the president?
Well, I didn't know he had borrowed my language because I've been in office longer than he has. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, I think what we're saying is that look, I live on the border, but at the same time, being on the border and being a Hispanic, because some people feel that if you're a Hispanic, you want open borders. No, we don't want to see that. We want to make sure that we have a process, an orderly process for immigration. As an example, my father was born in Guerrero, Tamaulipas, became a naturalized citizen, and then became a legal resident and then a naturalized citizen. He followed the process. It took a long time. We don't want people to come over and give them amnesty. We don't believe in that. We want to see an orderly process when it comes to immigration reform, and we want to see security at the border.
But your fellow Democrats do want amnesty, some of them.
Well, again, there is going to be diversity among the Democrats, just like there's a lot of diversity in the Republicans that don't even want to see the dreamers itself. So again, the last time we had amnesty was under a Republican president named Ronald Reagan and a Democratic Congress. I don't believe in amnesty. Now, can we do a pathway to citizenship, or can we legalize folks? I think those are steps that we can certainly talk about.
All right, Democrat Henry Cuellar of Texas, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll come back to the show when and if there's a deal.
Thank you so much. I will.
Another Republican is calling it quits. Representative Darryl Issa says he will not seek re-election after his 9th term ends. The California lawmaker faced a tough battle his last election, and Democratic challengers have lined up to take him on during this year's midterms. Democrats need to win 24 GOP-controlled seats to win control of the chamber in November. South Korea says President Trump deserves, quote, big credit for helping restore dialogue with North Korea.
우리의 외교와 국방의 궁극의 목표는 한반도에서
President Moon Jae-in also said he is open to a summit with North Korea. President Trump later said he is open to meeting with Kim Jong-un's government under the right circumstances. A mortar shell causes massive damage to a Catholic church in the old city of Damascus. Fighting between government forces and rebels damaged the conversion of St. Paul Church. The bombs also hit a nearby Maronite cathedral built in 1865. Government officials in Zambia closed churches amid a cholera epidemic that threatens 14 million people. The Catholic Herald of England reports the country has banned all services and meetings in heavily populated Lusaka. Catholic bishops in other parts of the country have discontinued handshakes as a sign of peace at Mass. Catholic Church officials in Guam say they have notified the Vatican of a new sexual abuse allegation against Archbishop Anthony Apuran. Apuran already faces multiple allegations of sexual abuse of altar boys in the 70s. He has denied those claims and has not been criminally charged, but the allegations have prompted a Vatican inquiry. And Pope Francis sends a video message to the people of Peru and Chile ahead of his trip next week.
Mirarlos a los ojos, ver sus rostros y poder entre todos experimentar la cercanía de Dios.
Francis says he wants to see their faces and look into their eyes when he visits January 15th through the 21st. And this comes as the Vatican takes over the Sodality of Christian Life, also known as SVC. It's a Catholic movement based in Peru whose founder is accused of sexual and psychological abuse. The executive director of the Catholic News Agency, we should point out, which is owned by EWTN, is a member of that movement. Juliette Lindley is EWTN News Nightly's Vatican correspondent. She joins us from Rome. Juliette, tell us about this group and why is the Vatican intervening?
So SCV, or the Christian Life Movement, was founded in 1971 by Luis Figari in Peru as a lay movement. And today it has 20,000 members in South America and in the US. Now, in 2010, Figari was accused of abuse, sexual and psychological abuse, and he stepped down. And while he's never been charged, the allegations were confirmed both by an SCV internal investigation and by a Vatican inquiry. The Vatican has named a commissioner to take over, and it's a move that comes just weeks after Peruvian prosecutors announced that they were seeking Figari's arrest, and Figari is actually living in Rome.
Well, this news comes as the Pope is about to leave for Peru and Chile. Tell us what's on the Pope's schedule and what he'll be doing.
Yeah, the Pope leaves on Monday for a one-week trip, and he's first going to be in Chile. And the theme of that trip is I Give You My Peace. And then he will proceed on to Peru, where the theme is United by Hope. Now, he will visit the capitals of both countries, so Santiago and Lima, and he will also visit 2 cities in each country. He'll, of course, meet the authorities, the diplomatic corps, bishops. Also, he will be meeting a lot of the people in both countries. Now, this trip comes just 4 months after the Pope was in another South American country, in Mexico. Hailing from Argentina, the Pontiff has visited quite a few South American countries since he became Pope in 2013. He's visited Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, Paraguay, and Cuba.
You think maybe he misses his home? I'm thinking maybe. All right, thank you so much. Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thanks, Lauren.
And late this afternoon, the group at the center of the controversy released a statement saying they will work closely with the Holy See and the commissioner assigned to them. And they say they are grateful to the Pope for his concern, and they reaffirm their obedience to the Holy Father and Church. Pope Francis stresses the importance of silence during Mass.
È l'atteggiamento dell'orante assunto dai cristiani fin dai primi secoli.
At his weekly audience, the Holy Father says we must remain quiet to hear our own hearts and the voice of the Holy Spirit. The Pope also says the liturgy, quote, is a true school of prayer. Coming up, lives at risk. A new report reveals the most dangerous places to be a Christian. And defending the lowly. We talk about the plight of the poor in India with an Episcopalian bishop on the ground. North Korea is the most dangerous country in the world to be a Christian. That's according to a new report by Open Doors USA. The watchdog group warns of alarming trends for Christians facing persecution. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby joins us with details from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. It's no surprise North Korea tops the list as the worst persecutor of Christians. The State Department also recently declared North Korea as one of the most severe violators of religious freedom. But what is eye-opening, global persecution against Christians is on the rise.
Aggressive man, Muslim man, he just attacked us and insulted us and threatened us that he want to kill us only because we are Christians.
Tabitha, an evangelical Christian from Egypt, says she fears for her life. She's not showing her face on camera because she's worried about retaliation. Tabitha says in her country, Muslims regularly harass their Christian neighbors with no repercussions.
Christians in Egypt facing the persecution in their daily life, in their jobs, in the Christian kids in their schools as well.
Despite the risk, Tabitha and other Christians have come to Washington to tell their stories. Their visit comes as Open Doors USA releases its annual World Watch List. According to the group, the most dangerous countries for Christians are North Korea, Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, Pakistan, Eritrea, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, and Iran. Christina Arriaga, a member of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, points to an alarming trend. Thousands of women around the world reporting being raped, sexually harassed, or forced into marriage.
In countries where women are not respected, generally also their religious freedom is not respected. And in countries where there's no respect for religious freedom, unfortunately women oftentimes suffer more than the men because then they're obligated to marry within their religion.
One of the countries where that kind of persecution is on the rise is India. Samuel, who also doesn't want to show his face, says despite harassment by Hindu extremists, he won't give up his Christian faith.
I know my Lord Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, and I know I have a true faith that He is the only Lord of my life. And whatever may happen, I will never leave my faith in Jesus Christ.
Open Doors says more than 200 million Christians around the world face high to extremely high persecution. They say one of the rising threats for Christians is Islamism. That's the use of Islam for a political agenda, forcing Christians, for example, to live under Muslim domination and Sharia law. Lauren?
Wyatt, there are so many examples of Christian persecution around the world. Did this report list any countries where things are getting better?
Lauren, there are some countries where Christian persecution has declined slightly. So, for example, there are several countries in Africa like Ethiopia and Kenya. Now there, Muslims and Christians have actually come together this past year under common political movement. But unfortunately, though, the general trend upwards towards more persecution globally is what's on the up. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. A Vatican news agency reports 23 attacks on Christians in India during the Christmas season. While they make up a little more than 2% of the population, the majority of those Christians are Dalits, members of the lowest caste. Yesterday, I spoke to a leader who ministers to those social outcasts. We are joined by Episcopal Bishop Joseph D'Souza of the Good Shepherd Church of India. You're an advocate for the Dalits. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for being here. Tell us what life is like for the lowest social caste, the Dalits, and specifically the 60% of that group who are Christians.
Life is tough, and especially in the last couple of years, they've begun to express how tough it is.
Give me an example.
The example is they are bottom of the economic pile, social pile, loss of dignity, And in the last few years, because of the rise of extremist groups, they are targeted because of what they eat. For example, they eat beef, they are targeted. Some of them have been publicly flogged because they eat, kill cows or take care of cows.
So tell us what life is like for Christians. Are they allowed to embrace their Christianity?
There is freedom, but increasingly in many of the states, especially in North India, there is a thing called freedom of religion, which is really an anti-conversion law.
So you are not allowed to convert to Christianity?
Yeah, and despite that, many of them do, and Christians do get accused constantly by the right-wing groups that we are engaging in forced and fraudulent conversions.
So that you are trying to get people to convert, therefore you should be arrested?
Arrest the preacher and the guy who's bringing the good news, as well as the Dalit who converts. Both of them can get into trouble in many of the states.
You said that this recent eruption, which is a result of thousands of years of discrimination of the Dalits, could lead to
a crisis, very much a social crisis, because now globalization, the knowledge about what they have heard and seen, and the right to freedom, they have begun to assert themselves more and more. And every time they assert, there is a severe violent backlash.
And do you expect that to happen now?
It's simmering. But this time, as I've been saying constantly, the Dalits will find their freedom and break out of the caste system. One way or another, this cannot go on. Time's up.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us, Bishop Joseph D'Souza.
Thank you.
Up next, death in California. The state deals with yet another deadly natural disaster. And remembering a visit. New Orleans honors the only sitting pope to visit the city. Today marks 34 years since the U.S. established full diplomatic relations with the Vatican at the time. The Reagan administration said the U.S. held Pope John Paul II in high esteem and that it respected the great moral and political influence which he and the Vatican exercised throughout the world. The government in the Czech Republic says Catholic and Protestant churches will be compensated for property seized by the former communist regime. The government announced its decision, saying the religious groups would receive $2.8 billion over 30 years, but the property would be taxed. A vote is set for Tuesday. Hundreds of churches, camps, and charities in Canada seeking government grants are protesting a pro-abortion clause in the application. The Montreal Gazette reports that those who are awarded grant money will receive funds only if they respect, quote, reproductive rights. The Conference of Catholic Bishops calls it an obvious and unfortunate infringement of the freedom of conscience. And the founder of a Catholic school, St. Augustine Academy in Ventura, California, is among the 15 dead after mudslides in Southern California. A heavy rainstorm left shoulder-high mud and destroyed several dozen homes. 24 people are unaccounted for. The founder of the school, Roy Roeder, is described as someone who is dedicated to pro-life causes. A friend says thousands have been blessed by his generosity. His wife was rescued. Finally tonight, the city of New Orleans adds to its long list of tourist attractions a marble statue of St. John Paul II. It was unveiled in front of the famous San Louis Cathedral. It commemorates the Pope's visit to the Big Easy in 1987. John Paul II is the only sitting pope to have visited New Orleans, and now they can say that the saint truly marched in. Right? Yeah, okay. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. We will leave you tonight with pictures of the Pope at his weekly audience. Pilgrims and tourists alike came to see him. Good night, and God bless you.